our will is controlled by our sin, by the very nature of the sin that we have in our heart. So even when we desire to do good, we can't do it because we are unable to will to do good. You see, a fallen man is unable to will to do good because he is fallen. Do you think that a person who is drunk has free will? Of course not. A person who is drunk does not have free will because everything that he does is guided by his drunkenness. He's guided by his mind, which is not in the right state, which they cannot discern what is right and wrong. Now, do you think that a person who is high on drugs, cocaine or marijuana or whatever, or LSD, do you think that they have free will? Of course they don't have free will because their mentality, their mind, their will is controlled by another object, not their own. It is not their will. It is with the will of the drugs. It is the will of the cocaine. It is the will of the LSD. That's why they do what they do. Do you see that? So listen to what Jesus Christ says about the new heart, the reborn heart, the renewed heart, the regenerated. He says that out of your heart shall come rivers of living water. You see. So now that the heart has changed, now that the heart is regenerated, it is able to will to do good. Now the heart is able to look at evil and look at good and choose to do good. You see. So when I'm saying we do not have free will, what I should actually have said is that we don't have good will. We only have evil will. We only have ill will. The reason why the world is the way that it is in terms of murder and rape and hate and all these things that which are going on which in the world, which are corruption and murder and all these things, is because a human being outside of the Spirit of God dwelling within him cannot will to do good. Even that which he thinks is good, his intentions are always evil. That's why even at the beginning of a marriage it can be good, but because man has no power to will to do good, the marriages end up being abusive. The marriages end up becoming dull. The marriages end up becoming, the husband cheating on the wife or the wife cheating on the husband. The husband not loving his wife like his own skin, the wife not respecting his husband. Because we don't have the power to will to do good. Because we are evil. Because we are fallen. So the fallen man cannot will to do good. That is why consistently what is happening in the world is evil. That's why everyone's like to talk about the good old days. So the only way we can talk about good is if we look back, never forward. Because everyone can see that where we're going is just evil and darkness and loss. You see that? So we don't have any good will in us unless God does good work so that we can will to do good. So a human being cannot will to do good unless God has changed them. It's like what the Bible teaches is that our nature is evil. Let's say when you look at an orange tree, an orange tree can never give you bananas or lettuce or onions or tomatoes. Why? Because it's an orange tree. So naturally it gives you oranges. You see? So even us, because our nature changed when Adam and Eve sinned against God, our nature, which was good, righteous, just, loving, and glorifying God, has changed to evil, hating God, rebellious against God, and loving sin. So our nature is sinful. So it is impossible for us to do good. And somebody might say, but what about people who are, respectful? They're not really respectful. The only reason why a person who's not born again, who's not regenerated, who doesn't have the Spirit of God is respectful, is because they're trying to get something from the person that they're respecting. I'll give you an example. When you are a child, let's say when you're 12, 13, when your parents try to discipline you, to show you what is righteous, to show you what is the right thing to do in life, so you can have a good life. Do you know that in your heart you're rebelling against them, and in your heart you're saying, but what is this woman saying? I mean, of course, yeah, I came late last night. I came at 12 in the evening, but does she really have to say the things that she's saying to me? So you, in your heart, you wish you can tell your mother that, you can tell your father that, but you can't because your father is still responsible for your food, for your clothing, and for all the things that you need. So for the time being, you're going to act like you're respectful. Even when it comes to work, you don't really respect your bosses. The only thing that you respect is because they pay your salaries. That's why most people, when they get money, they start to saying all these things. If they, let's say, if they win the lottery or they start their own business, most of them start to saying all these bad things about their bosses. Why? Because they never really respected them. All they wanted was to get the money. Why? Because in their heart they are not respectful. You see, even when people give, they don't really give because they are good. The Bible says that don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing in terms of giving. But when people give, they want to show everyone. They want to put it on social media. So you see, I took this man, he was, in the street, and I took him to this restaurant and I bought him everything that they want. What they really want is to be praised by man. If this person's video does not trend or does not, get a few thousand views and a few thousand likes, and nobody's, telling him how good he is, this man is not going to continue doing the good that he's doing. Why? Because deep down, he's not good. He's just trying to get a good name for himself. Do you see that? So, because of our fallen nature, we are unable to will to do good. When we do good, it is always, sprinkled with corruption, with evil. Because what we really want is for ourselves to get what we want. We don't really care about everybody else. Do you see that? So, because of our fallen nature, our fruit is rotten. Our heart that brings its thistles and thorns is evil, like Christ says. So even when we desire to do good, we can't, because it's like an orange tree desiring to bring forth bananas. It is impossible. It is unnatural for it to do it. So the salvation of Christ, the salvation of God, the regeneration of the heart of man is the changing of the very nature of a human being. That's why we call it recreation. Because Adam and Eve were created. For God to make us compatible with Him again, He has to recreate us by putting His Spirit in us. Otherwise, it will be impossible for anyone to do good. A man who is born again will rather die than kill anyone. Why? Because his nature is against killing for whatever reason. So no Christian can say, I killed someone out of self-defense. That's a lie. Christ said that, my kingdom is not of this world. If this was my kingdom, I would fight. I'll call upon a legion of angels to come and fight on my behalf. Stephen, when he was being stoned, he was interceding for the people who were stoning him. Why? Because he had a heart of Christ. He had a new heart. So when you have a new heart, you are unable to will to do evil. Just like a person who has an old heart, which is evil, which is fallen, he is unable to do good. He is unable to will to do good. So only a man who is free, only a man who is regenerate, only a man who is recreated in the image of God, in the image of Jesus Christ, is able to will. Why? And a man who's not born again, a person who's not born again, a person who's not regenerated in their heart cannot will. Just like a drunk person cannot will, because he's controlled by the alcohol that is in his brain. Just like a person who's high on narcotics, who's high on drugs like LSD, like cocaine, like man drugs, he can't will to do anything, because whatever he wills is controlled by the drug in his brain. So a sinful fallen man is unable to will, because his will is controlled by the sin which is in his nature. So the reason why a fallen man cannot will is because he's under the slavery of sin. He's under the slavery of his fallen nature, which is evil. So all he does is evil. Even the good that he thinks he does, it will always be sprinkled with evil. Even the good that he thinks he does will always be mixed with, self-worship and self-promotion. It is never about other people. It is always about him. Do you see that? So the only way that a person can regain their will back, so they can will, is if they are born again, so that they could be recreated in the image of Christ, so that they could now choose to say, okay, if I go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be killed. But it is what the Father wants, so I'm going to go to Jerusalem so I could be, killed, so that my Father could save his children. So when a man is born again, he does think, okay, should I do good or should I do bad? Because when a man is born again, he knows what good is and he knows what bad is. So he's able to will, choose. He's able to choose and say, despite what may come of me, despite what may fall of me, I'm going to do right. If I die, then I die. Christ did the same thing. You see, Stephen knew that when he was telling the Pharisees that what they were doing, that they had hearts of stones, that they were rebellious against God, he knew that they were going to get angry. And then they got angry and they stoned him. And when they were stoning him, he was interceding for them. So in that moment of being stoned, you have a choice, either be angry or intercede. But only a person who has the Spirit of God can, in that moment, will to do right. And to do right is to ask for forgiveness for the very people who are his enemies. And when the Bible says to love your enemies, it clearly demonstrates that you can truly love your enemies and wish good for them. But it is impossible for a man whose heart is not changed, whose heart is not, filled with the Spirit of God, whose heart is not the same heart that God has, whose heart is not the same God heart as Jesus Christ has, to want to wish good for his enemies, because God is able to give rain and food and shelter for all these things that he's giving to all people who most of them are his enemies. God is able to give laughter and the joy of tasting food and the joy of basking in the sun, the joy of looking at his nature to atheists who deny that he exists. You see that? So when you're not born again, when you don't have the Spirit of God, you cannot will. You're drunk. You're drunk with sin. You're drunk with self-worship. You're still the old man who has a fallen nature. And in that fallen nature, you are rebellious against God. You're unrighteous. You're unholy. You're an abomination. So you're going to love all these things, these unholy things, these unrighteous things, these abominations. Why? Because it is in your nature. You see, so when the Bible teaches that after receiving the Spirit of God in your heart, after God has done a work of regeneration, you will loathe yourself. Why is that? Because it is no longer your nature. So you hate what is evil and you love what is good, because now your nature is good. So you can only will what is good. You can only desire to do what is good. You see, because now you're good. You see, so your fruit can only become good. But when you're evil, you're fallen, you still have the old heart, you are controlled by sin. This is why it is very important for Christians not to judge people or to condemn people. The only thing that Christians must do is preach the word of God, and not necessarily preach the word of God, but show people the goodness that is in the Bible, the goodness that is in the law of God, in terms of the very life that they live. That if we're to look at what God commands in terms of a man not cheat on his wife, this is good, because men have killed other men and killed their wives and their kids because there was cheating involved. If God says that do not steal, this is good because men have lost their belongings, the things that they have worked hard for to accumulate, and people just come and steal. If God says that employers must treat their employees fairly and pay them fairly because they also have a master in heaven who is God, people realize that this God really cares about people. So you see, when you take the Bible and apply it to people's lives and solve the niggling issues that people face, God gets glorified and people get attracted to this God. You see, so it's like I said, it's impossible to will when you are sinful. When you're still in your old nature, you are unable to will. You're controlled just like a drunk person is controlled by alcohol. You're controlled by your sin. Just like an addict to drugs is controlled by drugs. You're also controlled by your fallen nature, which is rebellious, which is unholy, which is an abomination towards God. Do you see that? So the only way that a human being can regain his ability to do will is if he gets born again in the name of Jesus Christ. This is the only way, because now his eyes will be open. He'll be able to see evil and he'll be able to see good. The reason why atheists believe that Christians are just stupid or by believing in sky daddy is because an atheist basically has one capacity. That is the intellectual capacity. But the Christian has two capacities. He has the intellectual capacity and the spiritual capacity. Do you see that? So an atheist will never be able to will to do what is spiritual. And what is spiritual is good because he doesn't have it in him to do it. So he's always going to do what is earthly, what is temporal, what will only last until you die. But a man who has the capacity of, the spiritual capacity and intellectual capacity is able to will to do what is spiritual and will to do what is intellectual. So this man has an advantage because he doesn't just do things which are advantageous to him temporarily, but he does things which are advantageous to him even for eternity. So if you want to make an atheist see that, you're disabled in a way because you only have one capacity, which is the intellectual capacity, is if you put the Spirit of God in him. But we don't have the power to do that. The only thing that we can do is preach to them and show them that the withdrawal of God from society will lead to a destructive, self-destructive, chaotic society. when we show them that and reason with them in a civil manner, some of them will start to see and God will do work and they will change. So, like I said, we do not have the power to will. We do not have free will. We are controlled by our fallen nature. We are controlled by our sinful nature. We are controlled by the old heart, which is rebellious, unholy, and an abomination towards God. And if we truly want to will, we must pray to God to put His Spirit in us so we can be able to see both evil and good. And because we have the Spirit of God, we can only do good. So, thank you for listening.